Alrighty, and we'll get started with that. Hello, everyone. My name is Flavio Diaz. I'm your graduate admissions counselor here at the College of Communications at DePaul University. I want to thank all of you for making us a part of your evening tonight and joining us for our final edition of our faculty talks for this academic year, I should say. But today's talk is titled Soft Skills for a Hard Knock World and presented by our very own professional lecturer, Kristen Pengelly. Thank you so much for joining us. As you know, we host these talks throughout the year to share our faculty, their research, and their expertise. And we certainly hope that by the end of tonight's talk, you'll feel excited about the topic, but also curious about the vast graduate educational opportunities that we offer here at DePaul University. To kick things off, we're also joined by our esteemed professor and director of graduate studies, Dr. Matt Regis. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt so that he can deliver some welcoming remarks and introduce our speaker. Feel free to take it away, Matt.
Thank you so much, Flavio. It's not always I get to be esteemed, but it's really nice to get to see everyone on a Mexico City, Alejandro.
Thanks for
CDMX,
joining us.
one of my favorite cities. Super cool. So as Flavio said, Dr. Matt Regis, our director of graduate studies, we've had a really vibrant year of faculty talk webinars. This is our sixth and final faculty talk, and then we're going to go on hiatus, and then we'll be back in the fall. And before I introduce our guest lecturer and instructor for this evening. Some of you I know are very much either DePaul students, DePaul alums, or DePaul faculty, maybe even double demons. But let's talk a little bit briefly about DePaul University. We are the nation's largest Catholic university. We have over 20,000 students, 10 colleges and schools. This evening's event is put together by DePaul's College of Communication, Graduate Studies, and our compadres like Flavio in graduate admission. We have more than 200,000 alums located around the world, but more than half of them choose to live and work and play and stay in Chicagoland. We always say that Chicago for DePaul students and faculty is our classroom and it is our research laboratory. We have representation from all 50 states. We're very proud to have a diverse mix of students, including very welcoming of our international students. And then 92% really success rate. And so we are very proud of, you could think of it as kind of our placement rate of how our students are doing in terms of advancing in their careers. And now we get to introduce my colleague and friend, Professor Kristen Pengelly, who is a longtime lecturer in the College of Communication. She also proudly is a DePaul alum. She has her master's in organizational and multicultural communication, and I think she loved this place enough to stick around and has been really shaping our students for a long time now. She has a bachelor's in business administration from those guys over in OHIO at Bowling Green University. And she teaches a range of classes for us at the undergrad and graduate level. She's officially in communication studies. She focuses on organizational and political communication, but I'm also really appreciative that she also helped kick off and teach and develop curriculum in our master's in professional communication. And I also want to give a shout out, and then I'm going to put into the chat. Professor Pengelly is one of three faculty projects across the entire university that was funded by a grant through the DePaul University Library focused on OER, which is Open Educational Resources. I serve on the Library Review Board, and Kristen has is one of the three projects a textbook, open access textbook on business and professional communication. It's a remixed textbook to be used in our introductory mini sections of our CMNS 201. And there's all kind of cool materials, supporting materials like PowerPoint slides, discussion questions, and quizzes. So I'm going to put that resource, like this is a free part of our mission of accessible quality education, and this lines up beautifully with it. And then I am just so looking forward to tonight's topic because in this AI world that we are in, soft skills cannot be more important. And I think Kristen and I both probably prefer the term durable or enduring skills because it's not soft. It's actually more important. It's really those human skills that are increasingly important, not just for our graduates, but for early, the mid-career, and even us senior level folks. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Professor Kristen Pengelly.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. One thing that I did want to add about that textbook that might be really relevant for all of you, if you look in the additional resources section for every chapter, there are links to some videos and really accessible information that might be really fun for those of you who perhaps don't want to read the whole textbook, but are looking for a brush up in some of those areas. So I think that just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. All right, so let me share my slides and we will get going. And as I do that, I did want to say, so Matt, you're not wrong that I do also enjoy the idea of durable skills. However, I also want us to like reclaim the fact that, oh, hang on a second, it just stopped. You know that I've done this 1,000 times. I'm not sure why it stopped sharing. There we
There
go.
we
Now
go.
we're
We can see
better.
it.
All right. So, I think it's really important for us to say, like, yes, soft, durable, but also there's nothing wrong with being soft. You know, maybe the whole world could use a little bit more softness. So, one thing that I did want to mention, this is something that I have kind of remixed. I'm really, I guess, very big into remixing and revising this year. From the Center for Teaching and Learning, I did a presentation related to this in the fall, and a lot of faculty gave me really positive feedback. So I wanted to, adjust it for a different audience and add a little bit of additional information as well. Durable skills also doesn't work as well with my nod to Annie. So that was just, a marketing choice. As Matt mentioned, I have a background in business and I worked in marketing and program management and also sales for a variety of different organizations before teaching full time. So, to talk a little bit about what we're going to do today, first off, we're going to just kind of come to an official definition that we'll work with tonight on what soft skills are. Also, we're going to talk about why they're important. As Matt mentioned, it is very much cool to be human these days as the computers continue to become tools that we're using. And of course, bringing a lot of anxiety along with that. But in general, having great soft skills allows you to work alongside them and become even better at prompting and utilizing that. Also, I wanted to address that they are really identifying, they meaning people who are employing new grads, they're starting to identify a skill gap. So, in soft skills, particularly. So, I wanted to sort of talk about that and just share some information about what they've been finding and talk a little bit about what we can do as people who maybe educate or manage or are raising young people these days. Because if there's a deficit in the young people, I think we sort of need to look to ourselves about the fact that perhaps we haven't been developing those skills enough, but it's not too late. And then I want us to kind of reflect independently about how are we enhancing and marketing our soft skills. I'll share some really compelling research about kind of what's trending on LinkedIn, particularly as just a place that I know a lot of people do go to look for new job opportunities. And then we'll have Q&A. Hopefully, I'll have answers, but there's also just nothing wrong with having big questions that we leave here with. And then we'll go forward with like our final charge and what we must do in order to help everyone develop these durable skills. So, first off, there's a lot of debate, of course, over the soft skills definition. What we're going to work with tonight, if I can get everyone's support for that, is non-technical competencies that are associated with personality, attitude, and the ability to connect with others. Other places that have defined it, McKinsey and Company defines them as non-technical skills that enable someone to interact effectively and harmoniously with others. The US Army calls them job-related skills involving actions effectively, primarily people and paper, because talking about paper meaning leadership and supervision. In general, it's a cohesive blend of knowledge, abilities, and values that support the development of a skill or activity. So, one of the commonalities that all of these definitions have is that it's a combination of interpersonal skills, like interacting effectively with others, active listening, teamwork, and empathy, and intrapersonal skills as well. So, those abilities related to understanding and managing your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions, having some self regulation, self awareness, and like being a self starter in general. So these are fundamental in giving employees a competitive edge. They help to future-proof us against all of the changes that continue to happen. I mean, just think of what's been going on in the last 3 years. Students recently in one of my classes mentioned that they heard someone state that the jobs that they're going to be doing haven't been invented yet. And they found that, really profound. And I think it also made them feel a little bit better about some of that insecurity and the nervousness that they have about the job market. But I think back to when I was in college, I graduated in the late 1900s, and social media was not a thing. And I was a marketing major. And so when I got into my professional career, everyone thought that since I was younger, I would know social media, but I'm like, this is brand new to me too. So figuring out how we're adapting and kind of looking forward. Um, there's an increased need for high levels of social interaction in workplaces, particularly with a lot of people working remotely. Obviously, we hear a lot of those conversations around people feeling detached from their workplace. And that is less likely in people who do have developed communication skills and are a little bit more willing to collaborate and reach out to other people. So Matt already mentioned one of the other ways that these skills are rebranded as durable skills. You'll also see them referred to as transferable human skills. Again, human computer interaction is something that I saw a lot in some of my research for this. Also, these are really closely attached to emotional intelligence. So there's a positive correlation between social skills and people that have high EQ. So one of the reasons why this has become really like such a big deal, this chart up here is from IBM's 2023 Institute for Business Value report. And as you can see, STEM skills were really, really highly valued in 2016. They were considered the most important requirement in the workforce. But in 2023, it had fallen to the least important. That's because a lot of businesses are seeing those as much easier to teach or replace. Durable skills are much more difficult to train, yet they're more predictive of long-term success. So these durable skills are highly transferable. They can be used and implemented regardless of the industry. Whereas the perishable skills, maybe like a coding language or a platform, an organizational structure, are very job specific and they do not really lend themselves very well to people being resilient and adaptable. Researchers have estimated that the half-life of technical skills is about 4 years now. It used to be about 10 in the 1980s, but it might soon fall below 2 years. So that's just like a astounding way that, you spend all this time. And I'm not discrediting that those are very difficult languages to learn. It's just that they are constantly evolving and changing as well. And what's not evolving and changing is the need to work well with others and to communicate well and to have empathy and work well in teams. The IBM survey, the same report that this chart came from, estimates that 40% of workforces will need to reskill due to the impact of generative AI and large language models, and that 44% of worker skills will be disrupted between now and 2028, which is not that far from now, really. So, what they're saying is that what we're learning is whether or not you're changing jobs, your job is changing. And I know that those of us who are in education have seen that, like having to adapt maybe some assignments to make them a little bit um, asking for a little bit different level of creativity, maybe having people look at generative AI as a guide as opposed to a final product and everything, which I know Amy Merrick spoke about in last month's presentation as well. So if you can teach technical skills, but yet you can't teach soft skills very quickly. Generally when people hire you, they want you to contribute really soon after that. So it's really important that we start to think of ways that we can develop these in young people, regardless of what point they're at in their career or in their academic pursuits. All right, so I've been saying soft skills. I've talked a lot about durable skills. We talked about the marketing, but just to give you some examples, I imagine if a lot of you looked at your own resumes or if you looked at your LinkedIn profiles, you would maybe see a lot of these captured because these could be things that we were sort of explicitly taught to include. Of course, there's many more than this. I took a little bit of, editorial freedom in like choosing the ones that I really wanted to highlight. So if you would like to in the chat, you can also add some of your own additional like soft skills that you really find valuable, particularly if you already market people or if you manage people or if you're in education, like things that you have seen that you really can tell that there's some work that still needs to be done. And Flavio or Matt will let me know if there's, anything pressing that people want to address. But I did want to share some additional statistics around some of these specific words because we know that a lot of job searching and applying for jobs really is related to like having keywords on our resume or in our LinkedIn profile and everything. So, Lightcast in America Succeeds analyzed over like 76 million job postings from 2023 to 2024. And 57.7 million of them, or 76%, requested at least one soft skill. And 35.7 million, 47%, named at least three. So, what is most in demand, and I'm, honored to state this out loud, is communication competencies. So, of course, we like hearing that because that is what we do, that is what we preach all day long. But 53% of the listings that they looked at named them as a required skill for the role. So when they pulled all these job listings, I know that we understand that a lot of industries and organizations have their own jargon. So they created kind of competencies instead of looking at all of like the individual words. Customer service, they include as communication, management, they called leadership, problem solving, they look at as critical thinking. But the top five durable skills that they identified were communication, leadership, metacognition, critical thinking, and collaboration. So those were requested in these job postings 3.8 times more than the top five hard or perishable skills. So 8 out of the 10 most requested skills in the labor force today are soft and durable skills. So that's just like the case for it. So really, there's tons of data. I know that depending on what industry you're in, you like some quantitative data. So I wanted to make sure that I provided that. But what's happening is that they are starting to see a gap. People who are hiring recent grads are starting to see that there is a little bit of a skill gap that doesn't allow people to fit in or like socialize into the organization as quickly as they would like. So let me just put this up here for a minute and let you guys kind of take a look without having me talk over it.
So, folks, if you have some feedback or thoughts, Flavia and I are monitoring the chat, and I don't want to just be the yapper in the chat. Feel free to drop comments or thoughts in there, and we'll relay them to Professor Pengelly.
Yeah, I told them I can't really do two things at once. I'm on a small laptop, so it's like can't have everything open all at once. Is there anything that really is on here that you are like, yes, I've seen this, or perhaps I would like to push back on this because I am always up for a little critique of any sort of survey data. If you're curious where this information came from, intelligent.com, this was a September 2024 report. It's still being discussed, though, in a lot of popular media as recently as, like, I think USA Today just wrote about it recently. They surveyed 966 business leaders that were involved in hiring, and they found that about 75% of companies reported that some or all of the recent college grads that they hired were unsatisfactory, which is, a pretty loaded term in a lot of ways. But 6 out of 10 of them, out of these companies, had fired a newly hired grad within their first year of employment. 9 and 10 of them said that college grads would maybe benefit from some etiquette training, which a lot of etiquette is related to, social skills and um, some of the general gripes that they had that you'll see up here, a little bit more detail, is that they believe that they sort of get offended a little bit too easily, or that they kind of come off as a little entitled. They mentioned that they don't really respond well to feedback. I think that that is perhaps related to this getting offended too easily, where they're providing maybe some constructive criticism and people are taking it a little more personally than they're used to employees taking that. Some of them maybe mention that they're often late to work, they don't dress professionally, and also maybe use language that's inappropriate for work. So, there, of course, we have to mention the fact that the pandemic did hit this generation at a really crucial point in their education and their development for interpersonal development. I teach a 100 level class in Introduction to Human Communication. I also teach business and professional communication in a variety of formats. We talk about soft skills and we talk about their struggles. This is coming kind of straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, that a lot of them just state that they're more comfortable communicating online. They want to have these kind of connections and they want to be able to be really dynamic and in person, face to face communication, but they just feel really nervous about it. Um, a lot of them, not specifically my students, have mentioned this, but a lot of research is pointing to the fact that 9 out of 10 students aged like 14 to 22 have used AI for schoolwork. And while it's definitely useful, this is not an AI-based presentation. I don't want to get into that. It can reduce people's ability to kind of reflect or conduct their own research. So it's maybe cutting back. We might love it because it's really quick, but it also, information seeking is a really important skill to develop at a young age. So, because they have that tool that is so fast, it's some experts are stating that what's happening is that they're expecting immediate answers and instant gratification, and that it's perhaps reducing some of their mental stamina, their ability to really kind of like dig in and try to uncover new information. They just want what they get like from the quick searches as opposed to like digging a little bit deeper.
I
Also, this is something that, as someone that was teaching throughout the pandemic, I was really mindful of the fact that we were all going through something, and everyone was going through kind of a different thing, depending. But there was lots of workshops on trauma-informed teaching. So that really encouraged us as instructors to maybe be a little bit more loose with deadlines. We valued getting the work at all versus getting it at a certain time. So perhaps that is just something that has stayed with them a little bit. Also, I want to just bring up the fact that it could be that some of these hiring managers are maybe complaining about Gen Z or younger workers in general, is that there's just a misalignment of values coming from this generation and in traditional organizations, which I am all for, like changing a lot of organizational cultures. The issue is that the people who are hiring them are not necessarily members of their generation. So you need to adapt a little until, you are in charge. So as a
That
young Gen
was
Xer, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, now if I could just speak to that point, because that's what I found interesting with from that data. It says the top two reasons are lack of motivation or initiative and lack of professionalism. They're not necessarily, skills that could be developed. I mean, professionalism, sure, but I think even then, like you're mentioning, professionalism is a bit subjective to the generation and the
Mhm,
culture of
mhm,
an organization.
mhm,
So similarly with motivation and initiative, it's kind of like kind of difficult to to expect the workforce to have more intrinsic motivation if there's not a sort of external motivational factor, perhaps like, higher salaries or benefits. So I guess my question would be like, how do the soft skills fall into either increasing motivation or building your professionalism within
mhm.
these organizations that haven't quite adjusted to the cultural nuances of the
Sure,
different
yeah.
generations?
Great questions. I think the lack of motivation or initiative, we would really classify under those intrapersonal skills. So being kind of self-motivated and also professionalism can be really loaded. We know that a lot of places, like when I first started working, you had to kind of wear certain things. And like, I know that that has changed quite a bit. And that a lot of younger people think that professional dress, quote unquote, is outdated. They value comfort. Who cares what I look like as long as I'm producing my work? Um, but that's also like professionalism has a lot to do with perhaps the way that you're just presenting yourself. So nonverbal communication, the ways that you are kind of not maybe openly, and I'm not saying people do this, but like openly rolling your eyes at something that you have to do, like kind of looking like you're into it, putting on that customer service, the customer facing kind of look, are some ways that I think that there's a disconnect between the generations.
I'm
Also,
wondering.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kristen. I was going to say, I was just wondering if anyone had any responses or thoughts to what Flavio and Kristen are saying, because I think there's a lot to unpack there with professionalism and then motivation.
Just real quick, I was looking through the list and I feel like, I started working over 20 years ago when I first got my first job and everything. And I feel like I saw a very similar list back then when we were trying to bridge the gap with boomers.
Hmm.
And so I think Flavio mentioned it, but I think it's generational. I think it's always going to happen that older generations have feelings over the younger generations and vice versa.
Absolutely. I was about to say, like, I'm a young Gen Xer, so I'm like in the late 70s. So I'm not a millennial, but I do remember all of the outrage when millennials were entering the workforce. People were like, I mean, there were news reports on like 60 Minutes, like they think they should be able to go to yoga class. And I was like, they should be able to go to yoga class, right? So I think that we're at this really interesting point. I am not interested in like generational arguments. I think I'm always just interested in looking at like a measurable issue and seeing if we can consider how we can kind of help younger generations, like socialize into these spaces. And then once you're in it, change it. Change it for the betterment of everyone and for the betterment of society. So, what I wanted to move into next is a little bit of like how I think we can help. And then we will talk a little bit about how we can start to capture our own soft skills in our kind of work material in case we're looking for promotions or you're on the job market or whatever. Okay, so there are just three things that I really kind of focused on. And I did this, I had a little bit of a slightly different approach when I talked to the Center for Teaching and Learning, but I wanted to focus a little bit on persistence, collaboration and teamwork, and communication because of the fact that this audience probably has a lot of different roles. We've got people who are teachers, parents, managers, members of Gen Z, etc. I can only speak from two roles, which is a teacher and that of a former student manager, but I hope we can all find something valuable and actionable in here. So my choices were also motivated from the fact that I had like about 15 years working in offices and I've had about 15 years of teaching. Some of those were at the same time because I was working full time as I adjuncted. And also, I have quite a few friends that work in corporate spaces that do manage younger generations, whether that's in banking or ad sales or as a CEO of a international association. So quickly, one time I just sort of asked them for some of their feedback. One of the things that they mention is persistence. And I think that we can see this a little bit as instructors. Um, how many of you have really spent a lot of time on the creation of documents, whether those are for policies or procedures, their syllabi, whatever? I'm sure we have poured a lot of time and effort into those. But how many of us also routinely hear questions about information that is explicitly stated somewhere? This could be potentially controversial. Feel free to pop off in the comments if you'd like. But how about we don't respond to emails that are asking questions about things that are explicitly stated somewhere or explicitly available? Information is readily available. While it is easier to respond and get them the information because we don't want to like hold up their progress or anything, it does not promote information seeking skills. You can encourage students to look places before they ask questions, and you connect that to soft skill development. You don't say, I'm not answering because I don't care about you. You're saying, I'm not answering because if you send me an email and I don't answer to it, it's because you have that information, and I know that you have the power to kind of find it. Or what you do is you also let them know if they still have questions, they should just sort of cite where they looked for that information. So perhaps I have a question about this topic. I looked at this procedural document and I found this, but I need a little bit of clarification. That is a much better question, and that's a discussion as opposed to, you just telling them something. Also, it's really helpful for us because, we write things knowing what we mean, and it's not always coming across effectively in that sort of language. This was also something that I utilized when I managed student graphic designers at a previous job. They would come to me and be like, the printer won't work. And I'd be like, I don't really know how to make the printer work. So I was like, what is the error message that you're receiving? And, so we went through that. And let me tell you how it was heartwarming the day that someone came to me and they're like, okay, the printer didn't work. And I did this and I did that. And here's the error message. And I looked this up and I'm like, great, now we're in this together. We can problem solve this as opposed to me just like fixing something. Also, I'm just keeping an eye on time. So I think I'm going to go a little bit also to think about highlighting the process as opposed to just the output. This is heavily connected as well to the idea of growth mindset, where we emphasize that process of how people got to an answer over whether or not they got it right. Because quite frankly, it's really easy to get things done through generative AI these days. But what's the process? What was kind of your thinking through it? How did you approach this problem? That is a way to develop mental stamina, persistence, information seeking, a lot of soft skill development. Next off, I want to talk, of course, about collaboration and teamwork. And as someone who's taught many classes in organizational communication and small group communication, I have heard all of the reasons why people do not like group work. I don't mean to be really tough, but professional life is heavily dominated by teamwork and collaboration. Knowledge workers spend about 70 to 85% of their time on collaboration related activities. And 86% of employees and executives cite a lack of collaboration for workplace failures. So it's really important for us, even though we know we might meet some resistance, to provide opportunities for group work. If we don't, we're not helping them develop the skill. But it's not enough to just give them group work. We have to model group work and teach them how to do it well. So that might require a little bit of additional scaffolding or some um, frameworks in place to get people to kind of really think about it. If you're in a classroom, it's really easy to add in group work, but if you're at a workplace, maybe getting people to address a problem together as opposed to independently might be a really interesting way to add a little bit of additional collaboration. Um, my corporate friends that I did survey for this really stated that the whole like I'll do it myself attitude misses opportunities. They have found that decisions are not as sound. Their work because people are working from limited experiences and perspectives. And all of the small group communication research does support the fact that having more perspectives gives you a much better decision. Lastly, I really wanted to talk about the fact that it was hard to not put communication first since it's so important. But I wanted to end on this. So, communication is a very broad topic. I'm sure all of us, when we hear communication, we think of different things. We might think of public speaking or leading meetings, having an interpersonal conversation. I want us to think about a couple of things: asking for help and also asking questions and paraphrasing. And non-verbally, I want us to think about kind of looking into it, like getting enthusiastic about things. If people don't know how to ask questions, whether that's students or people on your team, they often get incomplete information, and then you don't know that they're struggling. So you can't help if you don't know that there's some sort of gap. And also, when people are unable to communicate what they need, what happens as a result is that people micromanage them, which is not great for anyone. It's not great for the person that's doing the micromanaging, and it's not great to be micromanaged. So we can always promote and model question asking. There's some excellent research and really accessible articles from Wood, Allison Brooks Wood from Harvard Business Review about questioning. A lot of my students have mentioned that they feel really hesitant to ask questions because they're afraid that they will look stupid or that they will look like they don't know what they're doing, which I find, very heartbreaking in a lot of ways. But research has supported that people that ask a lot of questions at work tend to be viewed as more likable and more engaged because they have curiosity about what it is that they're doing. Um, so what we also can do is, we talked about this and Flavio brought up the fact too, like lack of enthusiasm or professionalism. What is that? Some of that is nonverbal communication. It's important for us to maybe use some back channel cues when people are giving us instructions, letting them know like, oh, uh-huh, like nodding, tilting your head. These are all part of identity performance, which we talk about a lot in communication studies, but we want to encourage them to know that active listening is not silent. It can be paraphrasing, it's asking questions. I saw a really funny TikTok once. Yes, I'm also on TikTok. All right, I look at TikTok that somebody that was a barista at a coffee shop mentioned that they were kind of having a bad day. And a longtime customer asked them a question, and they were like, yeah, I'm just not feeling well, or I'm really stressed. And the person said to them, if you can't get out of it, get into it. Like if you have to do a task that's maybe not enjoyable, like see how you can kind of trick yourself into finding something productive of it. I know that a lot of times people are like, that seems inauthentic or fake. That's also an element of like customer facing roles and being part of society. So next, I wanted us to kind of consider how can we promote these skills in a dynamic way. And every time I'm thinking about like, oh, I should manage my screen time, I come across something that is so perfect for a project that I'm working on. So I hope you get as big of a kick out of this as I did. So this is from American Rivers, and they mentioned, they had like this whole scroll. I picked the two that specifically addressed soft skills. So instead of saying that the fish bit the fishing lure immediately, you can mention that they demonstrated decisive action taking and high risk appetite in a fast-paced competitive environment. So think about things that you already do in your workplace or that you do in your academic career and think about how you can sort of reframe them to really highlight those skills that are named as the top skills that all of these companies are looking for through their job postings. Think about how you can amplify your storytelling. Think about how you can kind of reposition things that seem a little bit mundane and instead make them a little more exciting to other people. Consider preparing. I'm sure all of us know if you go on an interview, you have some prepared questions. You have some prepared responses to very commonly answered asked questions. So instead, think about how you can highlight your soft skills throughout that, those durable skills that are long lasting. Often those have to do with maybe conflict management or dealing with like someone that's disappointed or not receiving the kind of service that they wanted or they hoped for. So try to figure out how you can work those into your responsibilities in LinkedIn, in your resume. Ask some friends of yours, like, what are some great things that you notice about me as far as these soft skills are? That
Mhm.
might be a really great way for you to get some perspective on how people are perceiving your talents and your skills as well.
Yes, Kristen, if I can also chime in, as
Yeah.
a former career coach here from DePaul Career Center, I also really uh, totally agree with the point that you're making about interviews. Interviews is almost entirely a lot of nonverbal cues that you're also presenting to the person that is interviewing you. So that's certainly a place where you can develop those uh, soft skills, right? Even just like the formalities of how you greet someone. Do you give them a handshake? Do you smile? Do you repeat their name? Those small little cues really do make a big difference. And even for people who do virtual interviews nowadays, the optics also matter on a Zoom interview, right? Like making sure that you have good lighting, good sound, you're still dressed well. All of those things even more so matter even more because
Hmm.
you're not in person. So even on Zoom, there's different ways to highlight these soft interpersonal skills as well. Just
Yeah.
wanted to add to the importance of that.
No, absolutely. I will stop sharing so that we can address any questions if that's the best way to go about this. And I'm glad that you mentioned kind of virtual interviews because I had a friend recently that said they're doing a lot of virtual interviews for her workplace, and that what was really evident is that people are reading verbatim like responses to some commonly answered asked questions. So I think we can look at that in a different way. We can think about the fact that it's good that they're prepared, but also, is it possible that they didn't really prepare? They just like generated some answers and like maybe they could work on that. It's fine to have notes. I mean, in a in-person interview, you have notes ahead of, but I think that what they were seeing is they were seeing people asking, could you repeat that question? And then reading a response. So they very much felt like they were plugging a question into generative AI and like getting an answer.
Kristen, it reminds me of when we had this conversation at a Author Page Society meeting just among educators a couple months ago of like, how are we adapting to AI? And one thing we talked about is like, you can use that Gen AI to like generate answers to questions, but when you're in front in real time with your supervisor, your team members, you can't say like, hold on, let me type in, let me see what Gemini or ChatGPT says. You've got to be
Mhm.
able to speak to that work in real time and have
Yeah.
that conversation. So, folks, we've got some time for questions. We're a nice sized group. So if you have a question, you can raise your emoji hand, you can raise your human hand, or you can just put your question into the chat, and Flavio and I will kind of help facilitate that. Tony, I'll start off and say Professor Tony Dang had a comment that Tony said, this reminds me of the soft selling versus hard selling advertising strategy, which is similar to the emotional intelligence versus the rational intelligence in
Mhm.
some regard. And I also thought, Tony, about which Professor Pengelly talked about early on, the overlap between soft skills and then EQ, emotional intelligence, which I would argue is becoming more important EQ in this AI centric world that we're in. Any questions? Yeah,
Um, I have a question.
Christy, yeah, go
Yes.
ahead.
Okay. And then I'm very sorry I was in and out. I was commuting, but hopefully I can listen to the recording. But a few minutes ago, Kristen, you mentioned that we could ask our friends and families for opinions about skills that we are good at. How do you have any specific recommendations for doing that in a way that doesn't cause them to be biased? Because I think they may say, "Oh yeah, you are really good at XYZ," or just say, "Oh,
Mhm.
I don't know." So do you have some more recommendations about how to best frame that?
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like maybe all of us have some friends who we know when we say, like, no, I want the real truth, they'll give it to us and we know it comes from a point of love. I think if you really build the question into some sort of, you're looking for assistance, you're looking for development opportunities. So you're looking for feedback that's actionable instead of them just being like, you're the best thing ever. Be like, okay, well, how can I capture that? Like, what are some skills that you see? Like maybe you're the social planner of your group, of your friend group. Maybe you're the one that finds the cool things that people like to do. So it could be a way that you're like, I'm really good at information seeking. I'm really good at knowing about opportunities. And so I think that if you ask them from a point of like really wanting to be able to have something that you can use to help you, then you might get some really meaningful feedback from some of your friends. Like some people are always just going to gas you up, which is great, but hopefully that helps. I did want to speak to what Matt was mentioning about when you're on the
Thank you.
spot. Oh, thank you. When you're on the spot, that you need to be able to, know your stuff. You can't say, oh, hang on. I have a friend that works at DocuSign, and they've been really encouraged to use AI a lot. All of their employee reviews are done with AI. They're really being encouraged. They're calling it work slop instead of like AI slop that we're seeing online. But also, when it's kind of from the top down telling you to do it, you're like, okay, I'm going to use this. And she mentioned that she was in a presentation recently from someone that she really looks up to that's in a different position, a higher level position than her. And she was sitting in the presentation and she was like, this is not good. Like, this doesn't make a ton of sense. And the presenter was being asked some questions from the leadership team and was having a difficult time answering them. And then she just said, she's like, you know what? I just plugged the information into whatever, and like they made the slides for her. So who knows if she just maybe is under incredible stress and just didn't have the bandwidth to put together a full presentation. But I think that that's probably a big teachable moment for her as well to be like, oh no, I cannot just plug everything into something and then present it as if it was my words and my thoughts.
Yeah, I read an article maybe about a year ago now on the New York Times, and it said that one reason that AI can never completely take over is that AI can never be accountable and it doesn't have a conscience. So
Mm.
at the end of the day, no matter how much we use it, there will still always need to be a human behind it who can take responsibility for whatever the result and impact is. So,
Absolutely.
I think that's so true, Chris.
Hmm.
It doesn't replace the subject matter expertise or the content expertise that have the human behind it to know when it's on target with what it's telling us, when it's off, when it's sometimes wildly off, or there's really big gaps in what it's sharing.
Hmm.
Um, and we're hearing a lot, I think, these days about the importance of human judgment. And I think as a professor, one thing that I find challenging is young people are still developing that content expertise, that subject expertise, and then that to have enough of the experiences in the background to be able to bring that human judgment to the table, because sometimes I feel like that chatter is a little biased to the senior level person or the mid-career person that's got the 20 or 30 years of the human judgment to bring to the table that the entry level or junior person doesn't yet have. And so I
Hmm.
don't know the answer to that, Kristen, but that's just something you know what I mean, that I've been thinking about that is almost like privileged or biased to the more senior level pro.
Yeah, AI is great for things that you already know a good bit about, like because it can free you up to do some other tasks. But if you are trying to like learn something from AI, that is difficult to be accurate, and it doesn't really provide a lot of nuance. I think one really startling statistic is that one of the top uses for AI is for counseling. People are using it for mental health support. And that I think we're seeing some lawsuits and we're seeing some litigation around that, which I think should be very interesting to see kind of what happens.
So we have a little bit of time remaining. If we have another a final question or two, so we just want to make sure everyone has a chance. And I'm going to reshare and put into the chat before we go. So I shared earlier Professor Pengelly's faculty bio, which has her contact information. And she's also on the LinkedIn because we talked about ways to spiff up the LinkedIn to make more of the case of the durable skills that you have. So I'm going to do that right now. And Flavio, if we don't have a final question, I don't know if you have a final
Yeah.
takeaway or piece of advice kind of to wrap us up, Kristen.
Well, I think that maybe there's not other questions because everyone agrees that these human skills are incredibly important. And now they're sitting thinking about how they're going to ask their family and friends and maybe trusted coworkers as well. What are some ways that they can emphasize those skills through their marketing materials? But yeah, I think that we were joking recently in a faculty meeting that it's like really hot to be human now. Like it's very cool. Everyone keeps talking about human skills are so important. And there's a variety of different ways that people are writing the like new corporate jargon. It's like human capital management and human skill, human computer interaction, human intelligence, all this. So it's a it's a fun time, I guess, to be a living, breathing person.
Certainly.
Well, we are grateful to have had your expertise from you as a living, breathing person. So we would like to thank Professor Pengelly for sharing these insights on the importance of soft skills in this hard knock world, and we appreciate everyone's attendance and everyone's questions. And if you are interested and enjoyed going back to school for the last hour, feel free to get in touch directly with me or with Flavio and his colleagues in grad admission. And Thank you so very much. Flavio, anything else to add?
Thank you, Matt. Just want to add, if you can see on the screen, my contact information as well as to our Office of Graduate Admissions. Please follow up with any additional thoughts, and we're more than happy to answer your questions or point you in the right direction. And a recording of today's lecture will be sent out shortly, tomorrow. If you want to rewatch it or revisit the conversation, you can always do so. And stay tuned for our future faculty talks, which will be coming back in the fall of 2026. Thank you so much, and thank you, Kristen, for being our final edition here.
Oh
And
my
I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening.
Have a great
God.
evening, everybody. Happy, it's really spring now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Pengelly. Thanks,
Enjoy